This is SoundNotion, the weekly podcast for new music and music news. I'm Patrick Gulo.
I'm Dave McDonald.
And Sam Merciers and Nate Blyton couldn't be with us this week, but we are happy to be joined by friend of the show and friend in real life, composer Ben Fuhrman.
Someone we've actually met.
Yeah, we've actually met him. Ben is just back from the SEAMUS conference, and aside from being a composer, he also performs in the group We Saw, an Arabic-influenced world music group. I think he plays about 5,000 different instruments in that group, right, Ben?
Actually, I'm only playing mandolin.
Mandolin?
That's it.
You know, the traditional Arabic mandolin.
Right.
Right.
So, Ben, thank you for joining us this morning, and thank you for being our SEAMUS correspondent, our senior electronic music conference correspondent, Ben Fuhrman.
Well, I like to think that I'm auditioning for a role at NPR's new music desk.
Right. I think that's pretty reasonable. So, Ben,
That they have.
how was SEAMUS?
Dave, Patrick, SEAMUS was simply one of the best conferences I've ever been to.
Whoa.
That's
First of all, major props to J. Anthony Allen and McNally Smith College of Music in St. Paul, Minnesota.
For those who don't know, maybe we should say what SEAMUS is.
Yeah.
We kind of skipped a part there.
Right.
What is it?
SEAMUS is the acronym for the Society for Electroacoustic Music in the U.S. It's a bunch of composers of electroacoustic music and performers, and they get together every year for these conferences and have a really great time listening to new music, talking about new music, and generally geeking out with each other about different electroacoustic music techniques, technologies, the whole nine yards.
So, and you presented a piece there as well, right?
I did. It was the performance of a piece I wrote back last July called There Will Come Soft Rains.
Awesome. And we will listen to that later on in the show. But tell us, so one thing that I think is interesting about this kind of conference as opposed to most other kinds of music, or at least the other kinds of composition conferences, is the extent to which there are people presenting products. Obviously,
yes.
that's a big part of a lot of instrumental conferences. You know, you go to a trumpet conference and they're trying to sell you trumpets and mouthpieces and all kinds of other voodoo things, and the same would be true of any other instrumental conference. But if you go to, I think you also went to the Society of Composers Incorporated conference this year, right?
Yeah, I did go to that one as well.
Not so much people selling products at the SCI conference, right?
Other than CDs, no,
Right.
not really.
So this is kind of a unique thing for SEAMUS. What were you going to say, Patrick?
I was just going to ask, is it more like a trade fair?
Not really. There were representatives from Cycling 74, makers of Max MSP, and Ableton had people there as well. They were demoing software, talking to composers who use their software and getting feedback on it. And also demonstrating new hardware in the case of Ableton. They had their push controller there, which is awesome. And if I had the $500 to get one, I would do it tomorrow.
What's so cool about it? What is it?
The push is like the Innovation Launchpad. It's a touch controller. You have a bunch of buttons arrayed in an 8x8 grid. But unlike the Launchpad, which has more specific constraints in terms of what it can do based on settings that are pre-programmed, the push can also be used as an instrument. And the way they've set it up and the way they demonstrated it was incredibly cool. You can actually control all of Ableton just by using the push. You can close the laptop lid, power off the monitor, whatever, and just create a piece entirely using the hardware.
Interesting. So, entirely using the hardware.
Like hitting it?
There's all the software. You write software that runs on this thing, or is it all pre-done?
All of the software that it's running is Ableton. So you can see in the video right now, it's running a step sequencer, and they're making edits to it while it's running another sequence existing already. It has a ton of extra buttons on the side that correspond to different controls, and then you do have that LCD display that shows you exactly what you're doing while you're doing it.
So can this run independent of a computer?
No, it does have to be attached to a computer.
Okay. And well, that looks pretty neat. But so there were. This is, I think, an interesting thing in electronic music, is that I think exists less in acoustic music, is the DIY thing where people are building their own stuff, and I feel like stuff like this Ableton controller is an extension of that, because you're essentially taking this kind of template and designing a musical instrument with this template. It's a strange thing, and you go to an instrumental conference or even an SEI conference and you see a violin piece. All the violins are basically the same, right? But all of these electronic instruments are not completely unique, but certainly approaching it, right?
Yeah.
You see a lot of people making their own stuff at SEAMUS.
Yeah, and there were some really cool pieces that were made using entirely homemade instruments.
Really?
Yeah, there was Lou Bunk's piece, Study for Bowed Cardboard, which he created a device that looks violin cardboard.
That's pretty charitable of you to say, I think. Violinish.
Violinish, yeah, that's the closest thing I can think of. And then the entire piece is performed by bowing the cardboard in very specific ways, and then that's processed in Max MSP to create these massive textures and processed sounds that come through the loudspeakers.
So, did you find that most of the music you were listening to at SEAMUS was live performed things and not pre-recorded things?
Somewhat. There was a lot of live music. There was also a lot of pre-recorded music, and there were also pieces that sort of took both approaches. There were a lot of pieces that used Apple's Logic, for example, to create a bunch of tracks and then synchronize those up with a live performer. Or there were also pieces that would just run entirely out of Logic or out of Ableton, and you would just get up and hit the spacebar.
Yeah. So did you hear a lot of? Well, let me ask you this way: what are some new things that you saw that you think we should be paying attention to as people that I listen to a lot of new music, but I'll be honest, I don't listen to a ton of electronic music, so I'm probably a little out of touch with what's going on. I should listen to more electronic music. What are some things that I should be looking for that I am missing as a person that doesn't listen to enough electronic music?
Well, there was one thing that really stood out to me more than anything else, and that was really evidenced in a couple of specific pieces. That was Paula Mathewson's AEG3, Jason Bolte's Child Play, and Kristen Volness's Nocturne. And that's the use of honest-to-God grooves and dance-type rhythms in electronic pieces.
Huh.
How are they constructed?
Yeah.
Well, these are pieces. Mathewson and Bolta both did pieces that were fixed media, so composed entirely in Pro Tools or Logic or Ableton or whatever they were using at the time. Tape pieces. But they're using a lot of sampled sounds, a lot of processed sounds, but they still have segments that go into regular rhythmic patterns and have actual rhythmic cycles that you can hear, and you can say this is in 4/4. It's 3/8 notes plus 3/8 notes plus 2/8 notes, a couple of ties in there, but you have a
You'd never write anything like that, would you, Ben?
It depends on how much the performer wants it. Arrangements can be made.
Sure. So that, I think, is really interesting, and something that I think we're seeing more of is as this kind of sector of the music industry grows, the weird kind of art music side of electronic music and the pop music side of electronic music are kind of bridging this gap. They're kind of meeting in the middle as they both expand toward each other. And a lot of these tools, like we're seeing this explosion of these electronic controllers. Like the controller that I have in front of me that I'm using to switch the show is the Novation Launchpad, and the controller we were just looking at from Ableton. They're not designed for weird, crazy music because that's not a big enough market to make an electronic thing. It's designed for pop music. It's designed for DJs, for people that are making electronic dance music. And it's interesting to me that we've been using the same tools for a long time, and now we're seeing the music itself get closer and closer together. And it interests me. I have a cousin who's really into electronic dance music and dubstep, and when I talk to him about his experiments with music and he's talking about using Ableton, it always strikes me as funny that, like, I think of that as this tool that my crazy electronic, concert music friends are using to make all kinds of weird things happen in live performance, but he's also using it to make dance beats.
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting. Do you think that's something we're going to continue to see? Is this kind of blurring of that boundary?
I really kind of hope so.
Why do you hope so?
Well, I'm definitely one of those people that writes a lot of very academic, avant-garde, classical, and electroacoustic music. But the problem is that the audience for that is very limited. And when you write these pieces, they're not really accessible to a wider audience. So there's no way to really grow and build a program as a composer or as an educator when you're only approaching it from the one angle. But if you're approaching it through a combination of the avant-garde and the pop, you're able to reach a broader audience, and your music is going to get out and affect more people.
Well, but then it's a different thing. Like the music itself is different, right? Like, I don't know if.
So are you like more interested in
you're reaching the people with a different thing?
Well, you're reaching them with a different.
The people. God, that's so condescending.
Yeah, you're reaching people.
I take it all back.
Well, yeah, I don't see it as really reaching them with a different thing. I see it as giving them something that they can latch onto in the piece, that then they can get into the more experimental aspects of the piece through that opening idea.
That's true. You sent us a couple of pieces from. Are these pieces that were presented at SEAMUS?
Yeah, everything.
So there was one in particular you pointed out, like, check out this spot where it goes into this, hip dance groove, and all the things before that were the weird, strange music, the avant-garde academic music, as you described, and then it transitioned into the dance music kind of sound.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that they're both incorporated. One thing that I think is weird about that, though, is that this is not music that you would dance to because of the thing that was going on for 3 minutes before the dance thing started. Like, this is not something that you could put on at a club.
Right.
Well, you could if you started 3.5 minutes in, I suppose. But in general, you could not do that because the whole thing before it is relatively unmetered and rhythmically very free.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there's do you see any issues with kind of the intent, like how this thing is intended to be used, because it's not intended to be danced to? I suppose we have that same thing with acoustic classical music. Nobody was intending necessarily to dance to some of the Baroque dance suites toward the end of the Baroque, right? Maybe they were.
Oh, possibly. Yeah, the piece you're referring to is Child's Play by Jason Bolte, who's the professor at Montana State University. And that intent of the piece is that it is a exploration of the sounds that he can produce using his daughter's toys, and specifically as a rhythmic study. So in the case of that piece, the rhythm is really kind of the forefront. And one of the things that really struck me was, like you pointed out, the move from this very free atmospheric rhythm, completely devoid of any bar lines, grooves, whatever, into an actual dance section. And to me, that just really kind of brings home the idea that just because it's academic doesn't mean that we have to shun all of the conventions of the popular music as well.
Well, of course. I don't think anybody would say that we do.
Yeah.
But the real
especially
question,
today.
Yeah, the real question, Ben, is what is your DJ name going to be now? Have you put any
I've got
thought
a
into
fun
this?
list.
This is probably the most important question you'll be asked on the show today.
Okay.
Perhaps ever.
DJ. All right, it's happening right now. Be firm.
Be firm.
I don't like the ones that are based on a person's name. It's got to
Yeah,
be.
but that also is like a sentence.
That sounds like
It's a
a
command.
foundation or a bracelet or something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
you should get a rubber bracelet thing.
Yeah.
There you go.
So you were talking about all these pieces that were showcased at the conference. Were there any actual workshop events that you could take part in and kind of create your own piece at the conference or work together with people in this kind of workshop setting?
No, there were demonstrations done by Ableton and Cycling 74, but there were no actual workshops, unfortunately.
You know, another thing, looking through some of the pieces that you sent me and some of the programs that I could find on the web, another kind of trend that I noticed, and maybe you can correct me, and this could be my confirmation bias showing through, but these pieces that try to deal with big data from the web and interpret it in some way, these pieces that are, taking information from Twitter and parsing it in some way, or taking information from Facebook, or any big data set. You could be scientific data sets, and then parsing it in some way to turn it into sounds. Did you see a lot of that, or am I just finding that because I think that's interesting because I'm a nerd?
In part, you're finding that there were some pieces that were using large data sets that had been culled from different physics projects or from the web, but there weren't a lot of those. That is a trend that I'm noticing a lot, just listening to new electronic music, though. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Cycling 74, who makes Max, and Kaima, which is kind of the other program that's kind of ascending right now, have really great tools for dealing with data in different ways.
Really?
Yeah, for example, Max, I'm a big fan of the col object, which allows you to use lists of comma-separated values. And then you can just take a text file, dump it into there, and then use that however you will in your piece.
Interesting. So it makes it really easy then to get a big set of data, something as even complex as a list of a bunch of tweets, but even better, something simple like a bunch of, market values of a stock or something, and parse it in. That's really cool. I like that.
Yeah.
And you can then, I assume, do stuff like that in real time with data that's coming in. That's very exciting.
And the other thing I've been playing around with a lot recently is the network capabilities in Max using UDP and OSC over the network.
So you can communicate between different devices, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Or on the web?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yes.
To both.
Okay. Awesome.
So
there
what
are
do you,
a lot of pieces that I've seen recently that use the Touch OSC program on iPhones or iPads and just send OSC messages over the network directly into Max. And then you can split those up, route them by the IDs of the objects that are drawn in OSC, and use that to control synthesizers, to control triggering of events, however you decide you want to do it.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. I gotta say, I never really looked into electroacoustic composition when I was in school, but I mean, the how much you know about Max
Didn't you make
MSP.
an album of
Yeah,
your
yeah,
dubstep?
That's true.
Of your
I did that.
dubsteps?
But I didn't I didn't actually like use Max MSP or PD or anything like that. There was no programming, as it were,
Right.
of things like that. It was strictly like Pro Tools. But that's very cool. I wish I had known more about using those programs, because I think it provides a real fruitful sonic landscape. That, I mean, just the possibilities are endless, really, for something like that.
Ben, that's a good question. How common is that? How often are people dealing with the higher level computing the way Patrick is talking about, and how often are they getting down into, as we say, close to the metal? Like we had Tristan Parrish on the show last fall talking about programming 1-bit music into
Like
tiny
assembly.
microcontrollers in assembly, and what's the proportion like of the people that are way down at that level and the people that are way up at the logic level?
Well, there are definitely a lot more people up at the logic level, just because it is so much easier and more user-friendly to start off at that level, or in Pro Tools or Ableton. But the more you do it, the more you're looking for things that you can't find within one of those programs. I love some Pro Tools, but Pro Tools does not have the ability to do Fourier transforms in there and dissect a signal and remove certain bands. But I can do that in Max in a program that would take me 5 minutes to write.
Wow.
Right, so you're writing the program. See, I can't write programs or
Sure
anything
you
like
can.
Oh, you can. You can.
You just copy other things that everybody else did and tweak them a little bit.
that. You know,
That's
as
what the
I
internet's
remember,
for.
as I remember, there might be an upcoming tutorial show about this very sort of thing.
Yeah, it's been upcoming for a year and a half now.
Right.
Any day now.
Something like that.
So this is really interesting. So Ben, maybe this would be a good way to wrap up. For people like me that don't listen to enough electronic music and didn't attend SEAMUS, where should I start getting into this music? Where should I start to listen to some of this stuff? Is there a place that I can go to listen to it?
A lot of it is I go on Pandora. I'll find a composer that I have heard of and then start from there. So
Really?
Even these guys that are presenting at SEAMUS.
yeah, some of them are on Pandora. They have albums out that can be heard on Spotify.
Yeah.
And searching electroacoustic music will get you some of that. There is also the Innova record label.
Yes, we've talked about
Which-
Innova.
They were definitely there, and they were definitely handing out a ton of electroacoustic music CDs.
Good
And
people
they
at
have-
Innova.
They are great people. They have a lot of great artists on that roster, and they have a lot of great samples that you can listen to on Innova's website.
Awesome. We will also put up links to some of the things that you sent us, Ben, because some of those were really interesting. So one place that you could go listen to some of this stuff, or at least find links to it, is on our site, soundnotion.tv/SN. Do you have anything else you want to say about SEAMUS before we move on?
Yeah, there is one other thing that I saw there that deserves special mention just because of how unbelievably freaking cool it is.
Yes, we didn't talk about the thing.
We didn't talk about it. Yeah.
Let's talk about the thing. I forgot.
Okay, so the thing is the eMotion controller. And it is a base station and a set of wireless sensors that can be affixed just using double-sided tape. Or if you have better skills with a needle than I do, you can sew them into your clothing. And with that, you can get different sets of data from these little emotes, as they're called, to the base station. And then from the base station into a Max MSP application that will allow you to route the data so that you can control things like lighting, sound generation, effects, anything you could possibly imagine, it can be routed to.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
you have,
if you're in the video, we're looking at their demo, and you see that they're moving. He's just basically moving this other thing around, not using any of the properties of the thing he's holding, except for this emote, which is looking at how he turns and tilts the device, right?
yeah.
And so here's another guy who's using that same device to, instead of control sound, control what's going on with this light. So this is just a motion controller. Why is this better than just like putting an app on your phone? Like, can't my phone do all this stuff? My phone's got all those sensors, right?
Well, your phone does have all these sensors, but these, from what I saw at SEAMUS, seem to be both more accurate and more expandable. You could have up to 7 devices with one of the base stations, which means that you could affix one to every limb of your body and your head and use that to control a piece. As they just showed in the video, you can see that they have expandable ports, so you can attach other sensors that you may already have to each emote. So you could drop a ribbon controller onto that and maybe use that to control a parameter. And all of that just gets sent directly into the application and then routed however you desire to use it.
That's very cool, and I like the idea of it. They show it in a couple of places on here. I was trying to catch I just missed it. Having it on a trombone.
Yeah,
like using it to just like capture the movements of a regular acoustic musician, I think is a really interesting idea.
Yeah, that was Chet Udell. He's a professor at University of Oregon and one of the developers of the eMotion technology. And he was there demonstrating that with his trombone at SEAMUS. He had that hooked up to pan automatically what he was playing in the trombone, to control lights, and to control playback of pre-recorded sounds as well, just by moving from left to right or up and down.
So I was just showing their Kickstarter pitch video. They are no longer on Kickstarter because, and you had the scoop on this, right, Ben?
I do have a scoop.
They got something better.
It appears that they may have found a better funding opportunity. I can't really say more than that, but that is what appears to have happened.
Cool.
There was also
actually, wait, hold on a second. I just noticed that their Kickstarter says they're in Florida. Is that true? Are they based in Gainesville, Florida?
Well, actually, Chet did his doctorate at Florida, so that was where they were originally conceptualized.
If they're still there, I'm going to go check them out, or I'm going to see if I can. Yeah. I'm not going to like just crash the joint. Anyway, sorry, I just noticed that.
Right. Yeah, there were also some issues that would have happened with the manufacturer. They would not have been able to roll everything out and meet the deadline that they had imposed on themselves. So hopefully this new funding opportunity will be able to ensure that all the deadlines are met, that the product will come out exactly as demoed at SEAMUS and on the Kickstarter video.
Well, that is very exciting. Do you, and so they don't know? Do they have any idea when it's going to launch then?
Probably they are going to have everything ready by August.
Oh wow, that's very fast.
Yeah, it's really fast. But you can go to their website and sign up and have updates sent to your email.
Well, that's very exciting. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for getting the scoop on that. I saw this thing that it was canceled, and I was like, well, I guess that's it.
That's that.
But, no, that's very, very cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Ben, awesome job talking about SEAMUS. We're going to definitely make you our senior electroacoustic music correspondent. like the Daily Show, where everybody's a senior something correspondent,
Exactly.
right? Because we don't have any junior correspondents here. This is grown folks territory.
When are we getting that intern we talked about?
Oh,
Yeah.
he's been working for me for a year and a half. I don't. I mean, who do you think's been taking care of all our accounting?
Right. You send it upstairs.
Right. He's up on 13. With it, he's crammed in the back next to legal. Now, as I was saying, John Coliano turning 75. Dude doesn't look a day over 50.
No, well, his press photo doesn't look a day over 50.
Well, that's true. No, he's a wonderful composer, one of the great living American composers, and he's got a big 75th birthday concert going on, and that is going on tomorrow as we record this, so on Monday of this week, and it is being streamed live, and we'll have the link on our site, and you should definitely check that out.
Yes. And it will be at LPR for those of you.
Yes, at LPR if you're in the neighborhood. Right?
New Yorkers are always doing this 75th birthday thing. I think they had one last year for David Del Tordici. Actually, I went to that one. I believe it was 75. But LPR basically is the birthday composer spot.
Yeah.
In New York. So Q2 is always broadcasting from there, which is great to always have them around.
Well, we'll start making plans for when you turn 75.
Right. I'll be
mark
I'll
your
be
calendars.
I don't know. We can talk about John Corigliano a little bit if you'd like, but I mean, this is, I think, as one of the most recognized American composers today. I think, a birthday celebration is really well deserved for someone like him.
Right, or someone like you.
Or yeah, that too.
No, it's absolutely, and I'm definitely going to be tuning into that stream. We'll have a link to that on our website. Speaking of birthdays, iTunes just had a birthday. The iTunes Store, I should say, just had a birthday this week. They turned 10.
Yes.
The iTunes Store, for better or worse, changed the music industry. People had been trying digital distribution for a long time, but it took somebody with Apple's clout to get all of the major record labels signed on to make it a good place to go, because at some point you could expect to find any music you wanted there. Until then, there were all these kind of separate destinations, and you had to deal with separate kinds of protection on the files, and it was a mess, and iTunes kind of consolidated all of that stuff. Do you guys have any thoughts on iTunes' 10th birthday?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me. Ben has thoughts on everything.
Yeah, I love iTunes. I love how
love is
they
a strong
have,
word.
Well, it is a deserved word.
Okay.
I buy more of my music on iTunes than I buy on CDs nowadays.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I'm not surprised that you buy most of your music digitally as opposed to on physical CDs. I am surprised that you buy it in the iTunes Store.
Yes,
Well, that's where everyone gets me. That's where I get gift cards for.
Well, you need to
friends
teach
and
you're
so-
gifting friends and relatives.
Yes.
So here's the thing about iTunes.
Here's the thing.
Here's the thing. So iTunes comes along, changes the music industry. I mean, you could have downloaded MP3s and other digital media elsewhere before that, but basically everyone starts going to iTunes. Now, this is something that changed the music industry most, I think, the way we listen, by completely destroying the idea of the album. I feel like we come out with albums these days simply because that's how you release music. You release it in a big bunch of 10 to 12 tracks or something like that. And that's the model that was always used before that. What is the purpose of having an album today, or listening through an album like people used to do back decades before? That's something I kind of miss, I think, about music, especially with pop music. Just, I don't know, putting on a CD or putting on a cassette tape or something and listening all the way through it. I don't know if that's good or bad, but
So I think that's
feel
a
like
product
something-
of specifically when you grew up, because if you go back a little bit further from then, the singles were the primary method of
they
sale.
were, but they still came out with album. Like, I mean, Meet the Beatles was still
but I
an
mean,
album.
people still come out with albums now. I think first of all, there's a very different situation between pop music and concert music, because concert music is often a lot longer, and often a single piece will have more than one track. But if the music is good, I think people still are buying the whole album when they are interested in the person that is presenting the album, and they're not doing it if the music is not good, or if they don't have enough faith in the performer, the composer, the artist, whoever's making the album. If they don't have enough faith, that enough trust that their purchase of the album will be worthwhile for more than just that one or two tracks, then I think that's not their fault. That's the person making the album.
So, I mean, this kind of, it closely resembles the idea that you think, I mean, maybe music should be immediately likable to people.
Did I say that?
No, I mean, I feel like you're kind of saying that because, like, you know, if it's good, then you'll buy it, you know, and maybe not every track on an album is good, so you won't buy those tracks.
I don't think immediately likable and good are the same or even related.
Yeah,
but,
there are definitely pieces that took me a while to get into.
But
I think they are related.
Well, you're wrong, because they're not. They're separate things. Because,
I mean, they're separate things, but they're related, though. Because, I mean, aren't likable things good?
Well, that's a very philosophical question you have there. There are plenty of things that I think that's a nice piece, but I don't want to listen to it again.
Right.
I feel like I'm saying something here, and
well, you're kind of raising the idea of how we consume music, and is it now going to this singles mentality versus the album, and what is sort of the relationship between the audience and the artist and the record company?
I think the album created a really unique music culture. Like people have listening parties and things like that, and that doesn't exist anymore.
I think the album is in some ways a false construct to begin with. Like, there's no reason why those things should be together, and there's no reason that it should be as long as it is. Like, have
you ever heard of the concept album?
Sure, but the length of the concept album is defined by the medium that it was created for. A concept album is as long as a 33 RPM record, or it's as long as a cassette tape, or it's as long as a CD, or now it's as long as you want it to be. It's like 5 hours. If you want to record November for 5 hours, Dennis Johnson, go to town, record, and that's one album, that's one piece. If you want to if you want to record a 2-hour rock opera and put it all up as one thing on iTunes or Spotify or whatever, you can do that. And if it's good, people will get the whole thing, and if it's not, they'll stop.
Right, and at the same time, you're talking about the album as being something that people used to listen to, but back when people first started recording music, Sousa, among others, wrote that was going to be the death of music, that it would put musicians out of jobs, and it was this horrible, just facsimile of the live concert, and he afraid of what that would do to the music industry and his sheet music sales.
So Patrick, here's my eventual response to your. I'm pointing like I'm mad at you, but I'm not. Here's my eventual response to your question about albums and singles. If we make albums, which I really think we should just start calling playlists, but if we make albums that are good, people will buy them, and if we make albums that are crap, people won't. I think that's the bottom line. If we make a collection of things that is good as a collection and something more than the sum of its individual parts, then people will see that and appreciate it. But otherwise, they won't. And it's our responsibility to make the things good.
All right. And so my response to that would be that I've bought albums before where on every track on the album, I've not been immediately. I don't know. I haven't really thought much.
Right, but you bought it.
But I bought it, and after having listened to most of the album or getting familiar with the album, I start to love all of the tracks. I mean, I guess it's like I worked towards. I was put in the world of that album, and I liked it. But it wasn't an immediate likability for me.
Well, but
And I'm glad. I'm glad I still liked it though.
I think that's a different thing, though. I think that's a separate thing.
But I don't think I would have been. I guess I wouldn't have been exposed to those sorts of things. Have not. I bought the album. Have not. I bought the album.
But you bought the album because you trusted the person to make a good whole thing.
Yeah, sometimes.
I mean, so when we talked about Carolyn Shaw's Pulitzer-winning piece last week, which again, if you haven't heard, you should because it kicks ass. It was originally released as part of an album, the debut album of her vocal ensemble, Roomful of Teeth, and after that was out and after the Pulitzer was announced a couple of weeks ago, her record label, New Amsterdam, took the 4 tracks of that prize-winning piece and put it on iTunes as a separate EP by itself that you could get just that piece. Do you think that detracts from the album? That if you want to get just this piece, you can get just this piece? It's like a 25-minute thing.
No, I'm not saying you can't provide singles at all. I'm just saying I'm just lamenting the fact that I don't know, albums seem to be going away.
I like that we can make an album that's 25 minutes long and that's not a waste of anything. If you want to make your album like a EP length thing that's not a full album, that's awesome. If you want to make your album an hour and a half that wouldn't fit on a CD, that's awesome too. We have a lot more freedom, and we're not limited by the medium of the recording anymore.
I know that's very true. I think I'm just being curmudgeonly about pop singles.
Right.
Honestly.
I
have no connection to any of those artists that are coming out today because it's like, oh, here's this one song, and it came out this year, and that's all you know about that artist.
Well,
and I guess
because those artists that you're talking about are vapid vessels that don't make more good music than a couple of tracks an album. But I think it's different when people are curious about the artist and have faith that the artist will continue to make awesome things. They'll buy the whole album. That's the artist's responsibility.
I know it's interesting. I wonder. I wish we could run this an experiment. Like if you had the whole Beatles catalog released in singles, if everything the Beatles produced was released in singles and not
a lot
in
of
album.
it was released in singles.
I know, but like Sgt. Pepper's was not, and Sgt. Pepper's has the idea of that album was even greater than any one song.
And I think people would buy that album, though. Again, we can't run that experiment because everybody already has it. All right? Can we put it to bed? Were neither of us convinced by the other?
I don't know.
You know what we're not going to talk about this week is a dumb composer with a continental name that wrote a dumb thing in the Side Boob Gazette. We're not going to talk about that because he's an attention whore, and we've given him an hour and a half of our show before, and we're done. We're done indulging attention whores. At least that particular attention whore. Though, if you would like to follow other people's mockery of him, you should go to Twitter and search for hashtag Dan Asia
articles.
Hashtag Dan Asia article titles.
Yes.
Article ideas. Hashtag Dan Asia article ideas is what you should search on Twitter, and that's all that I'm going to say about that. And now, our pick of the week. We don't have Sam to shout pick of the week. I'll have to maybe cut something in post from a past episode or something. But our pick of the week is, of course, as we mentioned earlier, by our guest Ben Fuhrman. Ben, we're going to play a clip from the piece that you mentioned earlier, There Will Come Soft Rains. You want to talk about this piece a little bit before we play it?
Sure. So, There Will Come Soft Rains was written last year. Its title is taken from the penultimate short story in Ray Bradbury's collection, The Martian Chronicles. And it was written shortly after Bradbury's death. I had heard about that on NPR and just kind of went back and was reminiscing and rereading some of my favorite works that he had written. The piece itself is very programmatic, and if you search for it on my website, you can find all the program notes to it. But it's kind of an interesting concept that I had, which was to take some samples that I had created for another piece but had never actually used, and to run those in Ableton and use pitch shifting, a lot of max MSP processing, and some basic probability theory to determine the playback of those at different rates of speed. So you have...
what are the sounds we're going to hear in here?
There's primarily two things. It begins with an Glocken that was sampled and is transposed, edited, processed, all of that to create a rough pentatonic scale with the addition of the tritone in there. And there's also live samples that I had recorded of violin playing both with a bow and pizzicato.
Cool.
And again, those are processed and heavily edited.
All right. So here is an excerpt from There Will Come Soft Rains by our guest, Ben Fuhrman. So that was an excerpt from Ben Fuhrman's There Will Come Soft Rains. Ben, thank you for sharing that with us. It was great. One of the things we were chatting about before the show about this piece, several people had asked, and I was actually thinking the same thing when I was listening to it, is why you decided to use all these pre-recorded sounds of instruments instead of having those instruments play live, because they're very identifiable. It's not, as though you chop them up beyond recognition. You can very clearly hear violin sounds and bell sounds. Why not have a violinist and a percussionist?
I think a lot of it was more a question of intent. I always conceived of this piece as being a fixed media piece. And it would be very easy to write this as a piece for live performer, but it was just the intent was fixed media. That there were some things that I could do that are completely easy and very simple to do as a fixed media piece that I can't do with live performance. One of those is the random triggering of the Glocken samples in Ableton. That's all automated, and every time I play that back from Ableton, it will give you a different set of samples for those.
So now, in that, then I have another question. I just played this from a audio file. When you perform this work, you're hooking up a computer with Ableton and hitting go, or are you playing this recorded file?
In some cases, I am performing it from a laptop with Ableton and just hitting go. In others, I am playing it back from a CD.
So in the former case, when you're playing it from Ableton, it is different each time.
It is different each time.
That randomness is seeded each time.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, they always start with the same sample for the very first one, but then after that, everything is seeded differently.
How different is it? Like, would I recognize it as the same piece?
You would recognize it as being the same piece, but it would sound significantly altered from what you've heard.
Interesting. I like it. Ben, thank you so much for sharing that piece with us, and thank you for being on the show this morning. We really appreciate it, and we'll definitely have to have you back on again sometime to talk about some more electronic music. If you would like to get in touch with Ben, Ben is right now going to tell you how to do that.
Well, there are a couple of ways.
See how I can control
BenFuhrman.com.
Ben? That was a game. Sorry, Ben. You played it. You played into my.
I played into your
Yes.
plans.
All right. Sorry. Plug away.
Well, I'm on BenFuhrman.com or on Twitter at BFurman. Those are consistent ways to reach me.
Where can
You can
people
also
hear your
find
music?
him by his. You can also find him by his DJ name, B Firm.
Yeah. Has that domain been registered yet?
No, but it's about to be. So you better get on it.
All right.
So Ben, awesome having you on. You can follow, of course, this show, which we do every Sunday live at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and you can catch that live stream at soundnotion.tv/live. You can find links to all the stories that we talked about at soundnotion.tv/n. SN. You can leave a comment there on any of the things that we talked about. If you have any thoughts on iTunes or albums and singles or electronic music and live controllers and making them yourself or buying them on Kickstarter, we would love to hear from you there. You can also connect with us on Facebook or Twitter. We're at SoundNotion on Twitter. As Ben pointed out earlier, he's at B Fuhrman. Patrick is at Vox Shibuya. I'm at Dave McDowell. Follow us all at SoundNotion. Like us on Facebook. This is often the part of the show where I ask you for money, and that always makes me very uncomfortable. So I'm not going to do that today. What I'm going to do instead, a lot of times people ask us how they can support our show. The most important thing you could do if you want to support the show is to tell somebody else to check out our show. So that's, instead of asking you for money this week, I'm going to ask you to share us. That sounds weird when I put it like that, doesn't it? Does that sound weird? Share us? Share SoundNotion with somebody that you think would enjoy it. There are a lot of people that would be interested in our stuff that maybe just don't know about us yet. So please help us grow our audience and grow our community. So we appreciate everyone who does that. SoundNotion's introduction includes music by Patrick Gullo and video by Tyler Lepp. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you back next week.